Bamber Bridge in Preston and Lancashire to find out more about the racial violence which took place on the night of June 24th, 1943, which saw black American GI Private William Crosland shot dead.
And this memorial stands outside Ye Olde Hobbe Inn, where the conflict started.
What was Bamber like in 1943?
It was a very typical small Lancashire town, pretty working class and very homogeneously white.
Well, the principal industry was cotton and engineering.
It wasn't known as being a particularly kind of a revolutionary, radical place. It's a kind of place where nothing really happened.
This was where black GIs were based in 1943, on Munsey Road in Bamber Bridge.
It was 750,000 up at Adams Hall, just up the road. At this point in American history, the army is still segregated.
Have you come to my Birmingham? You come to my home and have a cup of tea with me, both of you.
Thank you, we will.
Goodbye and good luck.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Now look, men, you heard that conversation. That's not unusual here. It's the sort of thing that happens quite a lot. Now let's be frank about it. There are colored soldiers as well as white here, and there are less social restrictions in this country. Just what you heard, an English woman asking a colored boy to tea. She was polite about it, and he was polite about it. Now, look, that might not happen at home, but the point is, we're not at home.
The African Americans in the army, they're not allowed to fight. They're there to clean the latrines, to cook the food, to do transport. They're not there to fight. That's for elite white soldiers.
Blacks should be used only in service units. Blacks should not command whites.
They are kept separate, and the British government played along with it. They're used to being treated really poorly, and yet white civilians in general are treating them really well.
The reception was such that there is evidence of black GIs being invited home for Sunday lunch, Sunday dinners with white families in Bamber Bridge, etc. There's recorded evidence that the residents were saying, well, these are people just like us. They're suffering similar hardship to us as working class people. We will stand alongside and support them.
There was some resentment towards white GIs when they came to Britain. They were seen as a bit brash, a bit arrogant, you know. They also earned a lot more money than British people, and so that attracted British women. There was a phrase, oversexed, overpaid and over here, so that kind of summed up how the American soldiers were seen, but that was not extended to African Americans. George Orwell said that African American soldiers were the only American soldiers who had any manners.
Yeah, and we just have to look at what happens in this very pub. Here we are in the Hobbe Inn. The local barmaid, Gillian Vasey, she talks about this place being a home for those black soldiers and then being able to drink here and having very convivial relationships with local civilians and also white British soldiers that are on leave. She says that certain white troops would come in here, though, and be quite resentful about that. So, for instance, when she's trying to serve someone at the bar, she serves them in order. And she says that the white troops trying to push in, the white American troops, and they try to, it's my prerogative, it's my right, and I always get served first. And they said, no, you get back to the back of the queue. We're in Britain now, and we don't have those rules here.
Yeah.
In this very pub in 1943.
The attitude that was taken by the residents of Bamber Bridge against the wishes of the American military and with the support of the British government, that this is our town, they've done nothing to us, we're fighting the same war in Europe, and until they mess up, we'll treat them just the same as we would treat our neighbour.
Black troops all over the country had relationships with locals, and white British women are saying, they're just changing my life. I'm suddenly dancing in different ways I've never danced before. At the same time as causing lots of excitement and interest, again, the racism is there from the American military, who think that this is undermining morale. Anti-miscegenation laws exist still in the 1940s in many states in the American South. So you're not allowed to marry outside your race.
In fact, within the military, if you wanted to marry, you had to get your commander's permission. And that's why some of these relationships were clandestine relationships, because the black GIs knew very well that no matter how much the two parties were wrapped up in each other, he was unlikely to get clearance from his commanding officer.
There were 3 pubs, I think, here that put up Black Troops
Welcome.
Black Troops Welcome.
Yeah, those kinds of signs went up all over the country because of the attitude of the military police. You know, that the landlords were saying, well, actually, no, these people are okay. What happened that evening? The pub here is coming up to closing down time, and there's a very mixed clientele, and they're all just kind of having a normal raucous end of the pub time. But that closing time, raucous time, is not seen as acceptable by the military police. That night, reports come that there's a disturbance in the Hobbe Inn. Or maybe it's almost a made-up thing by the military police. They're basically on the lookout for blacks causing trouble. So they come here, they see that one of the troops, Eugene Nunn, is not wearing the correct uniform for being out in the town. And so they try to arrest him. Now, at that moment, all hell breaks loose because everyone else, the other black troops see this as unfair, and they stop the arrest. And then the white civilians in the pub join in to help them stop the arrest. And there's a kind of a mayhem. In the midst of all this, one of the white British troops in the pub shouts out, "What are you doing arresting them? They're doing nothing wrong." And that's documented in the court-martial records. The military police are kind of pushed out of the pub. And as they're pushed out of the pub, they shout out to the black troops, "We'll be back for you." And the black troops start walking home. And behind them, there are 4 or 5 ATS girls. There's girls in uniform, women in uniform. I think that's kind of important because when the American military police come back with reinforcements, they're not just looking at those black troops, they're looking at the fact that they're interrelating with white women. That is the greatest taboo in the American segregationist terms. Anyway, they do come back, and there's a few more of them, and they stop and try to make the arrest again. And a more significant melee happens on the streets. So about 500 yards down from the pub on the way back to the base. At one point, because the American military police are armed, I think it's Eugene Nunn tries to get hold of one of the American military police's weapons. Then other military police start not only using their beliefs, also weapons are fired. And there is a melee which leads to injuries. But again, the black troops fight them off, and they get back in their van and they drive off. So there's been 2 fights now. There's now walking wounded. So anyway, they decide to go back to their camp to rally their fellow soldiers because they feel certain the military police are going to come back to arrest them. Certain of the black troops make the decision to open the armoury for their own self-defence.
To break in.
To break into the armoury, yeah.
They broke in. They wouldn't have had. That's for the officers, and the officers weren't giving away those keys. So, in fact, you have a rebellion against Jim Crow segregation happening at this moment. But for the American military, it's a mutiny against military authority, which is one of the most serious charges you can have against your troops. So anyway, there is this mayhem going on. At that moment, I think it's 4 military police vans, one with a machine gun on top of it, burst their way into the camp through the gates.
It's actually described as an improvised armoured vehicle. So they put some sort of shielding around to stop incoming fire. word is spread amongst the camp that the white military are just out to kill black folk, full stop, irrespective of whether you're involved or not. So that then just further enrages, inflames it all.
And now the incident spreads because many of the troops, rather than staying in the camp to be mown down as they see it, start dispersing with their weapons into the town.
It's also recorded that black troops came back, when they came out onto the streets, they were telling the residents to stay indoors because there's going to be a fight. Such is the relationship that they have with the locals that they don't necessarily want to see any come to harm.
There are numerous firefights, and in one of the firefights, Private William Crossland gets shot dead. There will be 2 court-martial trials about the mutiny of the black troops. As far as we can tell, although it might be under the American Official Secrets Act, there was no investigation into who killed Private William Crossland.
The thing to remember about this this evidence is that 2 things. One, it happened in wartime, so all sides were editing the information that came out and picking and choosing which bits they released. And the second one was most of the information originates in the hands of the Americans, who want to paint themselves in a negative light. In that 5-hour patch, it's only by the grace of God that we only had 1 fatality, and supposedly these 7.
And we're really lucky there are no civilian casualties.
When the morning came around, certainly in one house, the military police turned up, and then somehow they'd worked out that bullets had gone through front door. Came in, removed the bullets, and the perception is that they're going to see and make sure everybody's all right in the house. All they were doing was collecting evidence to get rid of it.
On the day or 2 afterwards, the report was just 5 or 6 lines long because military censorship doesn't want this bad news getting out there.
Within the British government of the day, they didn't actually want black soldiers in this country.
Yeah.
It's actually recorded, so it's not just some sort of emotional outburst I'm going through. It's there for Joe public to read. And all this precedes what we now come to look at the start of the race relations law and equalities by a good 20 years. How advanced were the residents of Bamber Bridge? That's why we can never give enough credit to the stance that they took, supporting these. In fact, they were referred to as the same as us, fellow workers, working class, same as us. So that stance can never, ever be allowed to gather dust. It's a lesson about acceptance and recognising what we have in common rather than highlighting to separate the differences that we have, because we have more in common than we have differences. And I'm going to credit the people at Bamber Bridge is recognising that.
These black troops were being treated like human beings, and that's a big lesson they took home with them. And that's the other side of this. They took that lesson home with them.
The Briggers had a conscience, and they treat people as people. You don't need a big complicated formula for solidarity. Conscience, reasoning, and an open mind.
And I think that's really interesting to me, is the solidarity comes out of a moral compass. It comes out of a humanism. And that develops through your relationships with other human beings.